independence has been declared, and we have a written document to prove it. Oh, there's a lot of writing going on right now. And with their words, these patriot authors are defining the future. In this lesson, we'll visit the period of early nationalism, a time when 13 separate colonies formed a unified national identity and stood up to the tightening screws of British authority. At least, that's the way the story is told by the authors who recorded it for posterity. The Enlightenment ideas that had been simmering for nearly a century came to a boil in the colonies. Instead of just reading and considering things people like John Locke had written about, life, health, liberty, or possessions, they acted upon these ideas. And how do we know about the thoughts and ideas that guided the formation of this country? We know about them because there were people who wrote about them. These writings took the emotions of the time and turned them into eloquent language. The written word shaped the structure of government and secured the liberties of its citizens. And the documents you will read this week gave us the foundation upon which America continues to grow. Through your daily PDF activities, online practice questions, online assessment, refresh your writing practice, and reflection questions, you will explore the ideas and ideals that were planted during the Age of Enlightenment, sprang to life with independence, and have sustained a system of government for well over 200 years. So, let's get ready to march back to 1776, our first stop in the period of early nationalism. Think back to our journey through the Age of Enlightenment. Remember how Thomas Paine wrote that pamphlet called Common Sense and it went viral, colonial style? His words really resonated with people because he tapped into their feelings about the monarchy, the British Parliament, taxes, the Boston Massacre, Lexington and Concord. All of those events had generated strong emotions, and Thomas Paine's ability to address those events and those emotions and then lead people to agree that independence was the next logical step, well, it was some pretty effective persuasive writing. Enter Thomas Jefferson. Well, before Jefferson became known as the third president of the United States, he was the author of the Declaration of Independence. Although most people didn't know that at the time. The document was technically the product of a committee that worked on some editing and revision after Thomas Jefferson had written the first draft. What's the deal with group projects? One person does most of the work, but everybody gets the credit. Anyway, the Declaration of Independence has three main parts. First, there's the introduction and preamble. The part where he says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." That sounds very reminiscent of Enlightenment philosopher John Locke, who nearly a century earlier had written that, "Being all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions." Very similar, am I right? And it wasn't lost on some people that while liberty was being claimed by colonists, enslaved people were denied personal liberties. In Jefferson's first draft of the Declaration of Independence, there was a 168-word passage condemning slavery as an oppressive evil of the British Crown. However, that clause was removed from the final draft, and slavery remained a part of America for nearly a century more. The second part of the Declaration of Independence is a list of grievances directed at King George III. Things like, he made us provide lodging for his soldiers. He kept imposing taxes on us and we had no say in the matter. He has basically waged war against us already and we are powerless to do anything about it. And for the big finale, Jefferson basically said, hey, we gave it an honest effort, and this just isn't working out, so peace out. Actually, he said it much more eloquently than that. He constructed his argument with precision and skill. And on July 4th, 1776, the Continental Congress approved and signed the final draft. The war raged on for 7 years, finally coming to an end in September of 1783. At that point, a treaty was signed, and the United States of America established its independence. The first order of business was to set up a new form of government. They knew what they did not want. They didn't want one person or group to have too much power. They wanted to ensure liberty for the people. And that's how we ended up with the United States Constitution. This time, James Madison wrote the draft. And then there was a lot of discussion and revision and a fierce debate about how much power to give the federal government. On one side, there were the people who wanted to avoid putting too much power in a central government. They argued for states' rights. On the other side, there were the people who argued for a strong central government to ensure personal liberties across all the very different states. This position was known as federalism. And in the state of New York, 3 Federalists named John Jay, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton put pen to paper to encourage ratification of the United States Constitution. Between October 1787 and May 1788, they wrote 85 essays under the pseudonym Publius. Originally meant for a New York audience, these essays were later collected and published, and today we know them as the Federalist Papers. These essays offered context to help readers understand and interpret certain provisions within the Constitution. Don't worry, you won't be reading all 85 essays. In this lesson, you will read Federalist Paper number 51, in which James Madison explains the balance of power built into the new government. And you'll read excerpts from Federalist Paper number 84, in which Alexander Hamilton provides insight into the framework of the Constitution and his opinion on the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights, aka the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, were added to help ease tensions with the people who feared that a strong central government might trample on personal liberties. Okay, so you have some background on the documents you'll read this week, the authors who wrote them, and the purposes they served. These documents definitely had an impact at the time they were written, but they have served to influence political theory worldwide, and they remain the guiding principles and ideals to which America aspires. As you read each document, remain mindful of the central idea and author's purpose. Look at claims and the evidence used to support them. After reading, you'll reconstruct ideas using your own words, and then you'll apply them to your life today. Hey, do you hear that? The fife and drum are ready to lead us into the world of early nationalism. Onward to liberty and independence!